My face is gonna turn out.
Yeah, see?
That was good. Yes, Gianna, your face is so red.
Staring at Lily to like, no.
Dude, I'm staring at Go, Maddie. You guys ready for Shawty?
Hey, you ready?
Yeah.
It'll be coming here in a second.
Yeah, guys. Yeah.
Guys, I think we're next.
Guys, ours is like 2 things.
No, we have enough. We have enough.
Then I do the height.
Okay, Riders group.
I do it from this side, right? I'm really excited to
Yeah,
Bella, you got this. Yes, Lewis.
Excuse me, Gianna.
So, no, 3 of them?
Yeah, no, yeah.
Get taller. Because I didn't want to do that.
That's amazing.
Wait, so 4, 3, and then 3 the last one?
No,
2 again.
Kind of creepy how good they are.
Oh, forgot to.
That's not bad.
That's good.
Wow, that was really good.
All right, now let's pull our desks back.
Pick ours. You.
Really go around looking for the last part was. Yo, we did amazing.
A little rough here on the case.
I'm not embarrassing myself. You have to do this too. If you're laughing, stop.
Well, we don't know if he's going to. He might.
He has to do it.
He might. I don't know.
I have to do it. You have to do it. Sorry.
Did Joey go home because he knew he had to dance today?
No, he has something important to do.
Oh, he's lucky.
Oh, yeah, he's actually pretty lucky.
Now, first of all, wonderful job in this short amount of time. Could you imagine if we actually did this for
Our school.
several days in a row?
We'd get really good.
You guys could put together.
Can we do it?
Now, keep in mind, who would be doing this dance?
Women.
Not just women, no.
Women that would guys.
Same that usually do the new dances today, which is who? Young people, okay? Young people, because the 20s, again, we said this is a revolution, meaning what?
Things changed.
Okay, lots of changes are happening. Changes in culture, changes in society, changes in the way that things are happening. And so the youth brought in this faster, more movement, okay? This, to the older people, would have been considered what? Not weird. Okay?
Different.
This would have been morally offensive. Because the dancing styles before the 20s were what? What would be the major dance before the 20s? Anybody know? The waltz, yes. Okay? And definitely the styles for the women before the 20s, how would they be dressing?
In dresses?
Like really long.
Long dresses?
Yes, all the way. If your ankles showed your
Being illegal.
You get risky.
okay? So, again, the changes in styles that were happening, because in a lot of the slang that we talked about, there were 3 major amendments that we're gonna be talking about more, that we've already talked about in the Reform chapter. What were the 3 major amendments that caused some radical changes too? The 18th Amendment, which we're gonna talk about, which is what? Remember this one?
Right.
We had
For
it in the,
women to vote, or is that?
we had this in the Reform chapter. What did that do? Andrew?
It banned alcohol.
So it banned the production and sale of alcohol.
Wow.
It didn't ban the drinking of alcohol, but it banned the production, sale, and movement of alcohol. So the problem with this, we talked a little bit about it, is that it created what in our country? What did this create in our country? That was in the other chapter too. It created organized, what?
Organized.
Crime. Which was known as what? Everybody remember? Sometimes it's called the mob. Sometimes it's called the mafia.
Oh.
Basically, they competed for control. People that smuggled alcohol, who remembers what they're called? Bootleggers. Okay? Those were the people smuggling alcohol. And illegal bars grew up everywhere. Wherever there were people, there was an illegal bar. Either in a shop somewhere, in a back room somewhere. Even the shoe shine boys would, in newspapers, would sell alcohol on the side. Okay, those illegal bars are called speakeasies. So if you don't remember these from your chapter, we'll see these again, hint, hint, that we're all taking notes on because you can't remember stuff, right? What's the other amendment besides this one? We'll talk more about this
The
on a
7th,
different day too, but
17th? Or
the 19th, what did that one do?
Women's suffrage.
Okay? Women's suffrage. What's suffrage mean? Who remembers what women's suffrage mean? Suffrage?
Voting.
Okay, the right to vote. Again, the women's roles changed. And then the other one that's related to this one is the 21st Amendment. Because this created all kinds of problems, the 18th Amendment. And sometimes this has also been called the noble experiment. But when it failed, this is the only amendment that's ever been repealed. What's repealed mean?
done
They
again?
took it back. So the 21st Amendment repealed the 18th Amendment. So today it's not illegal to what?
No, buy alcohol.
To sell alcohol, to move alcohol, okay? There are some counties that are called dry counties that they don't allow selling of alcohol, but as far as our nation, we don't have any law that prevents that. But by this time, organized crime had already made an inroad. So today we have organized crime. Where are they making their money today? On illegal drugs and prostitution and gambling in some cases, okay? So wherever there's an illegal activity, organized crime has moved in. Anybody know where it first originally came from? Got any Italians in here? Who was the famous gangster of the 20s? Al Capone. And organized crime grew from these families from southern Italy, from the island of Sicily, in that area. And so they ran their organized business like a family, and many of them were family members. But they would compete for control over the illegal activity in a certain neighborhood. So your book talked about one of the infamous times called the Valentine's Day Massacre, St. Valentine's Day Massacre. You know what happened there? So a gang, Bugs Moran was the other gang, but Al Capone's gang came to the speakeasy that was bumping into their neighborhood. So they dressed up as police officers and came in police cars and came into Bugs Moran's speakeasy and basically killed everybody with machine guns. And then some of the police officers took off their clothes and then came out handcuffed. So when they came out, the public thought that what? The police officers were coming in here and made a raid, when basically it was one gang wiping out another gang. So they could control the alcohol trade in that area. So you were supposed to have read to those, let's look at these two sets of questions that we haven't. You were supposed to have read the 564. Let's go to the first section.
Can I get my book?
For a service or a check?
A service, I guess.
Yes. Go to 700. $57 first. Let's look at those questions. Who wants to do one of those? And then we'll look at 764 next. Anybody? One question on 757. Because if you, again, remember, if we don't want to discuss them, we can write them out as answers if you want to do it that way. 757. Greta.
2A.
2A.
It's got slavery and it's illegal.
Are you on 757?
Oh, no, that, no.
Yeah. How far are we in our president's quiz? What was our last president? Who was our last president?
But we were like Calvin.
It was,
Calvin Coolidge?
yeah.
Did we get to the 35th president?
Nope. No.
That's Calvin Coolidge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or he's the 30th?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then we're all right. We're about where we are in history here. So you should know the answer to number 1. Because this is right after what war here?
World War One.
Yeah. So it looks like we forgot to read, or it's been so long ago, Mr. Hill, I don't remember any of it.
Wait, who was elected in 1920?
Yeah, that's what they're asking, right?
For A.
You're gonna do 4A, okay? Why was Herbert Hoover elected?
Wasn't the other person, Christian? And they feared that he would take orders from the Pope?
Who was president before Hoover?
Calvin.
Calvin Coolidge.
Calvin Coolidge was.
Yeah.
Well, how was the economy doing under Calvin Coolidge? This is the 20s. What is the 20s called?
The Roaring '20s.
The Roaring 20s. Part of that had to do because it looked like the economy was booming. You know, right after, immediately after the war, we said we had a what?
Revolution.
So right after, so we have 19, when did the war end? 1918. So for about a year, from 1918 to 1919, we had what in our economy, remember? A recession. That means what? We went over this like the first day last week.
Temporary business reduction.
So the slowdown in business. And we said the reason why business slows down right away after a war is why? Why do businesses slow down after a war?
Because they're not making.
Because they've been making war material.
Okay, they've been making war materials. They got to switch back to peacetime production. So the switching up takes time, and so they're not going to produce as much. Plus, there's not as big a demand for stuff that they had. We said unemployment goes up because they don't need as many people working. Okay, so you have a period of this, but from 1920 until 1929, we had an economic boom, or it looked that way. That's why part of it's called the Roaring '20s. Has to do with like the dance we just did, but part of it had to do with the economy. It was just seemed like it was going forever.
Excuse me.
If you own stock, what's stock? Who remembers what stock is?
Partial ownership in business.
Partial ownership in a business. So if you bought into a company like RCA, which originally made Edison's invention, you know what invention they made? That had to do with what you just guys did, dancing here?
The record player.
The record player. So if you bought in, you could buy a share of RCA stock for like, I think it was something like $2 to $5 a share. And by 1928, that was like $200 to $300 a share. That means that's how. So if I bought like 100 shares of this starting out, every year it was doing what? It was getting higher and higher. And they thought it was just going to keep going higher. But we know what's going to happen in 1929. Oh, I forgot the wrong date here, right? What's going to happen in this year? Okay, the stock market's going to crash, and the economy's going to take a tumble. Okay? We'll talk about that more when we talk about the Depression. But the economy was doing great. So the question here is, why was he elected? Well, that's why. What party is Hoover? Republican. What party is Coolidge?
Democrat.
Republican.
Oh.
If the party that's in power, if the economy's going great, the people are gonna elect who? Somebody from that same party. Okay? If Coolidge would've, ran again, he would've what? Or even if Harding would've ran again. So the question on, let's go through these. Number one, the result of the election of 1920, Harding won. Why? Because, again, we said we wanted to return to what? Normalcy. Let's get back out of the, we were in a war, the Democratic Party was in charge, so we're gonna get out of war with this new, the Republicans under Harding. B says, why did the Teapot Dome scandal reveal about his administration?
It was good that, some of Harding's friends that he elected, into higher positions were using it as an advantage to get illegal money.
So Harding's friends, what did they call them? They called him the Ohio Gang. Cause he used what system that we talked about when you're elected, what system is that called? The spoil system. So under the spoil system, who gets the jobs? Who gets the jobs?
The friends.
Your friends. So he had a bunch of friends that became known as the Ohio Gang, but some of those friends were corrupt. So they were, the Teapot Dome, they were leasing lands in Wyoming that were rich in what resource? Ben?
Oil.
Oil. And then they were pocketing the money. And that all came, now, even if President Harding wasn't accused, who gets blamed when something happens during your administration? Yeah, the president gets blamed. So, 2A, who succeeded Harding as president, is Calvin Coolidge. And again, Harding was a Republican. Coolidge was, even though Harding had these scandals, they still elected another Republican. Why? This, you can pretty much bet on it. If the economy's doing great, whoever is president, that party is what? Going to be elected. Even our last election, it was really close, but our economy had gone down. Why? Because of the pandemic, okay? If the economy would have been shooting up, chances are what? Trump would have been elected again, okay? Now under Biden, if the economy doesn't keep going up, what's gonna happen next election? He won't get elected if he runs again. So, because most Americans, they'll say other reasons for why they vote for a president, but most of them, it's all based on what? Your money, okay? Whether the money's going well or not. Who succeeded Harding? Well, we just did that one, didn't we? Calvin Coolidge. The Kellogg-Briand Pact, who knows what that was? You should know what it is, it's gonna be on the test. So it was kind of a big treaty, we're gonna outlaw war with it. Again, you don't change by make on a piece of paper and say, okay, we're gonna outlaw war. So you can't just pass a law and do that, because we're gonna find out it didn't work, because we have, in 1939, what happened?
World War II.
World War II, okay? Number 3A, why did American businesses grow during the 20s? because like Calvin Coolidge, you know what Calvin Coolidge says? The business of America is what? We had this back in the Reform chapter. His famous quote, the business of America is business.
Wow.
You know what that means? So most of these presidents were laissez-faire.
Uh-huh.
That means what? Government stays out of business. Businesses just run. There's no regulation. And so, because there's no regulation, the businesses prosper. Again, sometimes at the expense of littler businesses, but, okay? 3B, why were Model T prices so low? I wish I had a Model T right now. It'd be worth about $30,000.
Oh, it's a car.
They were low prices because Ford cut the production.
Okay, so he was able to turn out lots of them. That means high what?
High supply, low
High supply, what
demand.
happens to the price?
Goes lower.
Goes lower. So you could buy a Model T for like $300.
When normally,
When before it'd be thousands of dollars.
oh,
He turned out a Model T every 13 minutes.
what?
It could be any color as long as it was black.
Wait.
Why would they want black? You know why I wanted black ones?
It's the
'Cause that
simplest
paint-
color?
Paint, black paint dries faster.
Wow.
Why would you want the paint to dry fast?
So you can produce more faster.
It can make more cars, okay? You can make more cars that way.
How does black paint dry faster?
Because it stacks more heat.
Yeah, it absorbs. Who would you have voted in the 1928 election? Who was running?
Al Smith and Hoover.
Okay. Al Smith and Hoover. Again, they voted for Hoover. Why?
Because Al was a Christian and they were worried he would take answers from the Pope.
Well, he was Catholic, that's true.
And because
Mostly though, we just said, why do people vote for, why the president mostly?
Because economic was.
Because the economy was still doing well, okay?
uh,
So let's go up to 764, which you should have read. Looks like some of us need to go back and reread some of this, huh? 764. We should know 1A at least.
Yeah.
Who can tell me the answer to 1A?
Hoover one.
On 764. 764. How did flappers express their freedom?
Like going against like the expectations of women.
So what did they do that was against the expectations?
ooh,
Drugs.
me. Excuse me.
Right now.
They did do drugs. What drug did they do? Most people don't consider it a drug, but it is. Alcohol.
Oh,
They also smoked,
oh.
okay?
I have something.
Which ladies didn't do before this time period.
Excuse me.
So they smoked and drank alcohol, which was illegal, for one thing. What else showed they, how else did they express their,
By like cutting their hair short, because normally.
cut their hair short?
Normally they would have long hair.
They what? Okay, slang words. Sometimes obscene slang words. We didn't cover any of those. Profanity. Okay?
Did they have like way shorter dresses?
Dress is short.
They're wearing
To
like
showing your
skirts.
kneecaps.
Mhm.
We consider that what today?
Okay.
No, showing your kneecaps, that's long.
Wait, what?
Today,
Oh.
in the 20s, okay, when before we said the dresses went where? All the way to the floor, okay? If you showed your ankle, you were being a little immoral by showing your ankles. Okay? The other thing is, again, these types of dances where they're flowing their body all over.
Uh-huh.
You notice the fashion of the time for girls
Uh-huh.
was to take a boyish figure. So
Oh,
you
yeah,
notice
yeah.
the dresses, all the dresses they have, they don't have a what? They don't have a waist on them. They just hang down.
Would they wear suits?
Okay? So a boyish figure was the. I'll show you some pictures of the fashion of the ideals of the time. Why were young people, or how were they more independent than their parents? What advantage did they have that their parents didn't have?
Bigger step pocket, money.
It had to do with Henry Ford.
Car.
What did cars enable them to do?
Drive.
Drive.
Drunk drive.
Okay?
You drunk driving.
So you could go to places you could never go to before.
Yeah.
That gives you more freedom. What's the Red Scare? We talked about this. What's that? What caused it?
The fear of communism,
Why was there a fear of communism?
because it happened in Russia, and it happened there as well.
Okay. Describe the results of the immigration laws. How was immigration in the 20s? They didn't want immigrants. Okay? Because of what? What's the term?
Population. Isolationism.
Xenophobia. Fear of these immigrants.
New.
Okay? What kinds of social conflicts developed in the 20s? The biggest social conflict had to do with the old and the young people, and then also which areas of the country. It was urban versus,
Rural.
okay, urban versus rural. For the first time in history, 1920, you had about 50% of the people living in cities, 50% living in farms. Up until this time, the majority of the people lived where? Farms. Today, you know what the percentage is?
Like
95.
I think it's less than 5% of people live on farms in our country, okay? What's the 21st Amendment? We just did that one. What is that?
it canceled prohibition.
Cancel prohibition. How did fundamentalism influence the Scopes trial? You guys read about the Scopes trial?
Yeah.
What did that trial have to do with it?
It was
The teacher got sued.
for teaching.
Not sued, prosecuted, because it was against the law. He could have went to jail. He did actually go to jail.
Yeah.
Because he was teaching what?
Evolution.
Evolution.
And it was,
What's evolution?
Evolution says that we all came from
the ground.
monkeys.
Yeah. But that's against.
Why is it against the law?
Because
Back in the 20s against the law. Now, people that teach the other, saying that God created everything, those people are considered. So here we see a radical shift of morals, where God was in the classrooms in the 20s. But this case made the prosecutor, who was that famous Nebraskan who failed at president.
Yeah.
You guys remember that guy?
No, can we watch stuff about him?
William Jennings Bryan. Boy, that's like, you're right, trying to get a little great in here, aren't you? I think I was alive in the 20s.
Oh, please. Oh.
He was the lawyer for the prosecutor, and he won the case. But he was made to look bad. Okay? Again, that's a change in morals that are happening in our country. Our assignment. Oh, we need to vote, didn't we? We never voted.
That's okay.
Voted on what?
Which group you thought was best?
Can't vote for yourself.
Do you guys remember them?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You guys
Did you have a pick in your mind already?
Ryder we can do ours bad. If they need a refresher.
Oh, yeah.
They don't need a refresher. Ours is that.
Okay, we'll just go by numbers. Can you remember the numbers? So
No.
the first group is number 1.
I don't remember.
First group that performed.
Please read it. We're not gonna. Oh.
Okay, raise your hand if you were the first group.
Who did
If you were the
first?
first group, raise your hand. Okay, look around so you know. That's number 1. 2. Raise your hand if you're 2.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Raise your hand if you're 3.
No. Oh, okay, I know.
Raise your hand if you're 4. Okay? So you know who you're voting for. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Ready? Put your heads down.
Can't vote for yourself.
Can't vote for your own group. Can't vote for your own group.
Okay.
Raise your hand for group 1. Raise your hand for group 2. Raise your hand for group 3. Raise your hand for group 4. Okay. Boy, it was a tie. It was like.
Who was it? Who was the measure with?
In fact, there was a 3-way tie, and one group had 1 extra vote. How could that be? How many are here? Make sure I got to count right.
I think it's like
17.
yeah.
17. Yeah, that's right.
Who has
So
a tie?
3 groups got
Second.
4 points, or 4 votes, and 1 group got 5 votes. So what should the group win?
We'll just
Bonus
say
point,
or bonus
or
point.
spin, their choice.
No. How about it's a free essay question like
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
They don't get the points on that though.
And Mr. I should have. We have a religion test tomorrow.
Wait, what?
Essay question.
Religion test tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
No.
It should do a spin because it was a dance.
3.
Yes!
Who's
We did it.
We did Thank you, everybody.
Group 3 get a free spin.
No, we want an essay.
Essay question.
Free spin.
Essay question.
Free spin.
Okay.
Oh.
If you would have dominated everybody, see, it wasn't a domination. It was.
It was a tie and a win.
You were almost done anyway, so free spin, right? That's fair.
Fine.
Your assignment. Yeah, you can write in religion study for the test. 'Cause 6th graders didn't do this. Then write this down. Read the rest of the chapter. Some of you need to read.
Why did you got Lily's print out ours?
Read the 769. Read the 769. Chase, if you want to do your dance at home so we can all see it, you can send me the video.
Yes, please, Chase. Monkey.
Allison, you have to spin.